We're going to talk about a pilgrimage that happens in the world that very few of you know about. And I feel as though in the spirit of understanding and engaging one another, it's one of these, it's something to know about. And it's really cool and really worth knowing about. So this is a Muslim and Islamic pilgrimage, but it extends beyond that. I'm not going to talk about religion. I'm going to talk about the sociology of this as a way to open a window into something. And I want to start with this idea that, in spite of, we may know it, but, we get bombarded with so much news and data and news that is inherently about rare events, which is why, you read the news and you see violence, you see natural disasters, you see all sorts of just negative, terrible things. Well, that's because it's rare. News, we don't tell news stories about things that are common in every day. We tell news stories about the rare things. But what happens is we get caught up thinking that these things that we see in the headline are happening everywhere and all the time, and they're not. And so there really isn't a lot of violence in the world. And relatively speaking, there really isn't a lot of hate. If you think about how much hate you've witnessed over the course of the past week, personally witnessed, my guess is probably only a couple of you experienced anything you could call hate or even violence. It's like we don't see a lot of it. But if we look in the newspaper, we imagine that it's happening all the time and everywhere. And so it's really quite unfortunate that that we kind of pick out events and make them seem like the normal type of event for particular groups of people. So the other day when I was talking about Judaism and the Holocaust, so I made just kind of an offhanded quick comment about this really, that the Holocaust is really the origins of the Holocaust are lie in Christian ideology and theology. And there were, maybe some of you were like, what? What are you talking about? There were definitely people watching the stream who were saying, what? What are you talking about? But very much so. Right? The idea, there's an idea that became really dominant in Christian ideology that Jews killed Jesus. And, it was a central tenet of the Catholic Church, for one. And it was a central tenet of many churches. Jews didn't kill Jesus. The Romans killed Jesus. But in early on, the idea that the Romans killed Jesus is best that we can assess for what we know about the writings, because you do understand that what you know about the Bible today, like those aren't the original words of the original whatever was called the Bible. Like you really need to know that. The earliest piece of text we have from the Bible is like a credit card size piece of writing, they think, from the book of John. And and that comes to us from like the middle of the 2nd century. So this is 150 years almost after the death of Jesus. We really see this, and in some ways, Martin Luther, who's the father of of Protestantism, Martin Luther, the most important person for the Christian church to break away from the Roman Catholic Church. So if you're a Protestant, your journey started with Martin Luther. Was the idea, if you look at the writings of Martin Luther about the Jews and what should be done about Jews, and to answer the question and the problem of the Jews, it's exactly what the Nazis did. Burn their synagogues and throw them in prison and make them work, and if they rebel at all, kill them and put them in work camps and all sorts of things. I mean, oh my God, right? So you just see this idea of Jews killing Jesus. Well, it's not difficult for Christians with this mentality it is difficult, it happens somehow, but to walk down this path. And the Holocaust was committed by Christians. These were all Christians. Now, they weren't Christians, really, because no Christian would ever act like that. But they went to church on Sundays, so, they did what other Christians do. So a lot of Christians do really terrible things. And so, okay. But I don't know a single Christian who would support that. I've never met a Christian who's filled with so much hate. It's not part of my life. I've been a Christian. I was christened and baptized, and I've been around Christians my whole life. I've never met anybody with that kind of hate. And so it's just really unfortunate that there's this whole kind of picture of a particular point in time when Christians engaged in such horrific actions that it just could make your blood curdle and just scream and cry. So we're living in a time right now when we're seeing a lot of really radical, angry, violent Muslims. And these Muslims are out in the world committing some Muslims committing these horrible acts. And so this is what you see, like these people from ISIS. You got 1.8 billion Muslims in the world. There's about 2.2 billion Christians, 1.8 billion Muslims. And so it's unfortunate that we happen to be living in this time right now, these decades, when we're seeing all these really radical Muslims. It's still a tiny, infinitesimal fraction of all Muslims, but it is not about Islam and Islamic ideology. Just like the words of Martin Luther and other people that carried those on, is not about Christianity and Christian ideology, because that's been abandoned now. Like, it's done. It's not part of the church of Christianity. I mean, there are still some Christians who hate Jews and think that Hitler didn't go far enough and so on and so forth, right? But they're pariahs. These guys are pariahs. They are pariahs. They are not Muslims. The vast majority of Muslims, the vast majority of Muslims do not accept them. Just like the vast majority of Christians do not accept, for example, the radical, violent Christian groups, right? Like the Lord's Army and the DRC, for example, Christians are responsible for killing hundreds of thousands of human beings, slaughtering them. My experience in the world, in the Hindu world, and all of my work in different parts of the world and travels in the Hindu world, the Buddhist world, the Shinto world, the Jewish world. I was in Israel. All my experience is just nothing but encountering people who are really loving and kind and open. I was in Israel, and this was the first time I was in Israel, and I stayed with the family of a friend of mine who was a former student from many years ago, and then we became friends. And we went and we stayed with his family, and they were Orthodox Jews, and they lived in Jerusalem, in the really Orthodox area of Jerusalem. And people were like, oh, don't go to the Arab quarters. We're going to go into old Jerusalem, right? And don't go to the Arab quarters. It's dangerous. Well, it's dangerous because somebody got attacked like 7 years earlier or something, So anyway, it's dangerous. Don't go there. Of course, it's the first place we go because that's why we're there. We're there to talk to people. And so we go right to the Arab quarters. And so my friend is Jewish, and he's wearing the Star of David, and we go into all these Arab shops, right? And we're talking to people. And we go in the shop because we're just talking to people, looking for things. And every single time that the person saw the Star of David, the Arab shopkeeper, they'd be like, are you Jewish? And like, yeah, I'm Jewish. And they'd be like, hang on a second, Abdul, come here, or Muhammad, come in here. And before you know it, he's calling his friends in. And he's Jewish, right? And like, oh my God. And then they, before we know it, they're bringing tea out for us and pastries out for us. And Abdul is standing at the door going, when you're done here, you have to come to my shop. And we're thinking Abdul wants us to go to his shop because he wants us to buy something because he knows we're Americans. Abdul doesn't want us to buy anything. Abdul wants to be able to have my friend sit in his shop, my friend who is Jewish, because Jews never go to the Arab quarter anymore because they think it's so dangerous. But my friend is there and we're there, and they're like, do me the honor and the blessing of sitting here with me, and we will have tea together in my shop. So we're going to talk about this pilgrimage. It's the largest religious pilgrimage in the world. It is larger than the Hajj. So before COVID, about almost upward, they counted, the count is anywhere between 16 and 30 million people took part in this pilgrimage. And the pilgrimage ends right here at Karbala, and it starts right here in Najaf. But people come as far as Basra, they come from Iran, it is a Shiite pilgrimage, okay? So, 16 to 30, we're going to say 20 million. We're just going to go with 20. 20 million. 20 million human beings went on a pilgrimage to Karbala, to the grave of the grandson of the prophet Muhammad. Peace be upon him. 20 million, y'all. You get 20 million? There's 12 million people in the state of Pennsylvania. 20 million human beings. That's like New York City and all of its boroughs times 2. And they all go on a pilgrimage. And we're going to talk about that pilgrimage because, how does that happen? How do you do that? 20 million people. Take 20 million take 10 Americans, random Americans, and put them together in a group. You got the Trump people, you got the Biden people. Pretty soon they're at each other's throat. They're shooting each other with their guns. I don't know what are you doing? Okay, I'm making a farcical statement, but you get that. 20 million human beings. And so we're going to just talk about that. Because this is infinitely more fascinating for a class on race, culture, and ethnicity than talking about ISIS. These are 20 million people. ISIS is like a handful of people. But like this class, we're going to talk about all of Social 19, but we're just going to talk about these 3 people over here. And they're going to represent all of you. But it's just these 3, actually these 2 people right here. Come on. So anyway, this is awesome.